Hosts of Round by Round podcast. Our first guest, our inaugural guest, is Kyle Kingsbury.
Yeah.
Kyle is the man. Kyle is on season 8 of The Ultimate Fighter.
That is correct. Season 8.
Fought at 205 in the UFC. He recently retired about, in fact, a year ago yesterday. Was it? That was your last fight?
Yes.
In San Jose, in front of your hometown? Yeah.
Yeah, not the way I wanted to go out, but happy to be done, that's for sure.
It happens.
Mm-hmm. No regrets?
No, I mean, there's things you would change in anything. What's that?
No regrets about retirement?
No, none whatsoever. Obviously, when I watch my old teammates fight, that kind of thing, Luke Rockhold, Cain Velasquez, I want to get back in there when only when I'm watching them fight, I get the itch. But in training and doing what I do every day in life now, I have no regrets about moving forward and moving on with my life. And certainly when you see the climate of sponsorship and the way the UFC treats their fighters, I definitely don't feel bad about being done with the sport.
What was your main reason for retiring? Because how old are you?
I'm 33 years old, so I definitely got out young. But honestly, there was many different things that went into it. First and foremost, I want to tell the fans that the losses played a big factor. So for everyone that hears me, that sees an article where I say, ayahuasca and psychedelics changed how I feel, and I don't have a burning desire to punch someone in the face anymore. That's all true. Had I continued winning, yeah, I might still be fighting, but 4 losses in a row, and considering the amount I was getting paid, and when you lose these fights at 205, it's not like you're taking punches from a 125-pounder. I've had my face broken twice. They definitely take its toll, and at the end of the year, when you look back and say, man, I've been at the highest level, and I have a second job bouncing and bartending at least 20 hours a week for the past 6 years. Since I was on The Ultimate Fighter, when I got home from The Ultimate Fighter, I got the job at the Bikini Bar, and I've had it the entire time I've been in the UFC. So all those things played a factor. The being a 500 fighter, I don't feel like at this sport you can win 2, lose 2, win 4, lose 4, and go home and feel good about yourself. I mean, you have to be the hammer more than you're the nail. And if all things are even when it comes to that, that's not good. It's not like baseball or something like brain. It does take a toll on your brain. And I certainly thought about having a little guy now that we just brought into this world, wanting to be able to read to him, wanting to be able to collect my thoughts and not stumble on my sentences or drool when I'm speaking to him. Those kind of things all started to factor in. And then the losses, and then the psychedelic adventures, which we'll get into later. But all those things really played a big part of my decision to retire.
Good. And we want to talk about that a whole lot more in depth, because I think that you're definitely one of the most fascinating stories out there as far as you and maybe Jonathan Brookins, who he moved to India for the longest time to do yoga. So these fighters that veer off on a spiritual path, they're great stories. But let's start with Saturday night. Saturday night, UFC had a pretty good card. Had some really good contests. I don't know if they were as great as a week ago or 2 weeks ago with the Conor McGregor card, but Saturday night I thought was fantastic. One of the earlier fights was Ben Saunders and Kenny Robertson. And Ben is, a practitioner of the rubber guard through Eddie Bravo, and he's been using it effectively in MMA, and I haven't seen too many other fighters really be able to do that.
That's a really tough move to pull off. More often than not, it just sets you in a position to get punched in the face repeatedly. And I see that often with strict jiu-jitsu practitioners. They have a jiu-jitsu coach, they have a kickboxing coach, they have a wrestling coach. They don't have an MMA coach that can bring them all together, and that's the big thing that MMA has done. None of those sports have punching on the ground. None of those sports are competing in a cage. So if you don't have a coach that can bring all those things together and make a few tweaks you're going to have a hard time along the road.
I completely agree with you. I know having gone down and trained with Eddie Bravo in Los Angeles before, I definitely have a respect for the rubber guard. I even attempted in one of my fights just based on seeing it on TV, not ever having actually known the position. That said, I think Eddie is, he's a guy who's all no-gi. So his stuff applies a lot to MMA, a lot more than other people would think. And as to anything in jiu-jitsu, there's a counter to every position and every submission attempt. Everything you do, there's a counter to. And certain things are going to be better for different body types. Obviously, Jeff Monson's style on the ground is going to differ from any one of us here. But when you look at the guys who have been successful that train at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu with Eddie Bravo, I think of Tony Ferguson, just coming off a big win against Josh Thompson, my old teammate from AKA, and, of course, Ben Saunders. And these guys have continued to submit guys. They're finishing guys. They can finish on the feet, too. So let's not detract from that. They're multidimensional. They're not just Damian Maia type. And Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu is far greater than theirs, but the ability to knock dudes out and then to be able to be offensive from the back, which is, I think, a big difference than most guys' guard games these days, is I think what makes Eddie Bravo's 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu actually applicable in MMA today. And certainly having the body type for it, because Ben Saunders is extremely tall and lanky for 170, and Tony Ferguson is huge for a 55er. I mean, he's like 5'11", and I think he's got a 76-inch reach. So he's able to get in these positions and execute a lot better than most guys can.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
I like how you brought up Damian Maia there, and being a guy that fought Damian Maia, I'm familiar with his game, and I would agree. I think that he probably hasn't focused quite as much on the stand-up game. He works more on takedowns and then on jiu-jitsu, but when I fought him, it was such an eye-opening thing because I felt like, okay, we're doing jiu-jitsu until it gets to the point where he doesn't want to do jiu-jitsu any longer. So we would be rolling around or moving, or he would be moving on top of me, shutting me down. I'd be trying to escape, and his jiu-jitsu would come to the forefront. He would shut me down, lock me down to a spot where in jiu-jitsu I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm safe. He doesn't have any submissions. I'm doing okay. And then he would switch from jiu-jitsu to MMA and punch me in the face really, really hard to make me move again, which would open him up some possibilities for his next move. He had such a great way with just flowing, combining the strikes with the jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying I don't hate the man, but he's good.
That brings up an interesting point too. That do you two especially, do you ever focus on while you're fighting? Now I am strictly wrestling, or now I'm strictly striking, or now I'm strictly doing jiu-jitsu, or does it get so confusing that at any given point you're not sure what you should be doing versus one style over another?
I can say right now there's been yes to all of it. There's been fights that I've had where I had a game plan and I stuck to it and everything worked out exactly according to plan. There's been times where I had to implement on the fly and listen to my corner and Bob Cook screaming at me, fuck jiu-jitsu, just stand up, quit trying to sweep, just get off your back, and are we allowed to say F-bombs on here?
Yeah, you can say it.
Okay, or fuck the stand-up when I was fighting Manoa. He's like, stop trading with him, take him down at all costs. And then it started to work. We got in between. I got out of the first round with a busted eye, and he was like, dude, I don't care what you do. The second you get close enough to touch him, you're on his legs. And the whole second round, that's what we did. And it was boring and ugly, but I won the second round before the fight was stopped. So there's times in fights where you do get tunnel vision, and it works because you need it at that point in time. So it's only wrestling, or it's forget everything you know in jiu-jitsu, just get to your feet. Or, hey, he's tired. The second you get him on the ground, smash his face in, and then hunt for a choke. Whatever it is, there's times where that applies, and there's times where, in my personal experience, where either from a combination of getting hit in the face and a combination of fear and a combination of the stage, that I just forgot and went blank, and it either helped me to go blank or it hurt me to go blank, but I think every single fight was its own living entity. It was its own thing, and I could dissect and pick apart all the mistakes made and all the things that went right. And I've sat with sports psychologists, multiple sports psychologists, and try to break down things. And, okay, how do we attain getting back to the zone? How do we attain not caring but still having a healthy respect and a baseline fear that allows me to think, like, I'm not just going to go in there and walk through this guy. So a healthy respect for my opponent as well, I think, is necessary. I think all those things have been a factor in my career, and that's why I find it so fascinating to see a guy like Fedor or Anderson Silva who could walk into the cage and it looks like they're experiencing none of that. It looks like they're a stone-cold killer who can walk through anything and weather any storm and never be in a position where they're wondering what to do next. You know, they're just automatic. You know, and that's pretty amazing stuff to watch. I never got to that point.
Yeah, I think the sports psychology aspect of it is just incredible to me. A personal story on my side, when I was fighting for the title against Rich Franklin, as you can see behind me on the poster, I think we were Tuesday or Wednesday. So you get to Vegas on Tuesday, you fight on Saturday, and I want to say it was Wednesday night. And at this point, Randy Couture had left Team Quest. He was now down in Vegas doing his own thing. So it was myself, Robert Follis was my head coach, and there was very little discussion of what motivates an individual fighter. It was more like one size fits all. Well, if you look at Randy's approach to fighting, for him it's almost a release. It's his second chance after his wrestling ended. Now he's able to continue doing what he loves, and he's been competing since he was a little kid. So for him, when he got nervous, he would shut down. He wasn't able to perform as well, and when we would do mental exercises before the fight, it was always about him being relaxed and him just flowing and knowing these things. So that Wednesday night, just a few nights before my fight against Rich Franklin, I'm hitting mitts and I'm starting to get mean and I'm starting to hit the pads pretty hard. And Follis looks at me and he goes, "Stop. What are we here for?" And I said, "I'm here to win a title." And he looks at me and he goes, "No, we're here to have fun." And I thought, oh, okay. All right, I'm here to have fun. So from then on for the rest of the week, and keep in mind, I don't place blame for any of my losses on anyone but myself. My victories are a shared accomplishment. Losses are all mine. But for the rest of the week, there I am, joking and hitting mitts and having fun. You can see me smiling and joking as I walk down the tunnel to the cage. And the first time he smashed me with a really hard shot, you can see this look of shock in my face. And my mindset saying, wait a minute, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. I need to switch back to the way that I fight. And he finished me before that. And so it took me a long time to realize that's Randy's way of competing. He competes best when he's relaxed and he can visualize, I'm going to do this, and I've been competing for 30, 40 years. This is what's best for me. I fight best when I'm scared to death, when I have a lot on the line, and I'm really, really angry. It's just that simple for me. So it makes the process a lot less enjoyable. I'm a lot more stressed out, but that's when I get the win, is when I'm angry and I can take so much more punishment, and I'm aggressive and I'm moving forward. And the point being that I'll have people ask me, well, what should my mindset be before a fight? I don't know. That's up to you. Maybe if you're nervous and scared, you'll shut down. You'll be very tentative. Or maybe it will make you really angry and moving forward and hitting things as hard as you can and fighting as hard as you can. It's up to everyone's individual thing. And for me, that's what I realize is I have to be angry. I have to be scared. And I've seen other fighters like that too that needed that to win, but it was so stressful for them coming up to the fight that they could not deal with putting themselves in that mindset for months at a time. And so they would fail when it came time to deliver.
Right. Absolutely. Another fight on that the card this last weekend was Kyle's very, very good buddy Tom Lawler and John.
He's my good buddy too. I like Tom. We're friends.
We have all spent an extensive amount of time.
I texted him on Saturday. He didn't text me back. Doesn't mean he doesn't like. Doesn't mean we're not good friends.
He texted me back.
All right.
On Sunday. But in any case, Tom Lawler returned at 205 after a 2-year layoff against John Vellante.
John Vellante.
And it was a beautiful, beautiful fight. You know, Kyle, give us your thoughts. What did you see happening?
It was. I'm not sure the way it was going to go because obviously, I wasn't out there training with Tom. I know he had MRSA on his face and had to take some pretty big, pretty serious antibiotics, and those can affect the cardio tremendously. So I was hoping that it was far enough out from the fight that he was able to get his win back. And anytime you see a guy that's been used to fighting at a lighter division at 185, obviously he doesn't have as dramatic of a weight cut, so he's going to get some gas there. But John's a big dude. He's 6'3", he's got a 76-inch reach. He definitely has to cut down. He's probably around 220 on fight day. So I was wondering, if carrying that guy's weight is going to be an issue. But to my surprise, there really wasn't much wrestling going on. I think they both respected the fact that they were high-level wrestlers in college, and they were just going to test the stand-up. And John had a huge win against the Ultimate Fighter winner in his previous fight. Ended up outlasting him with body kicks and leg kicks, and then clipping him in the end of the fight. It was beautiful. So knowing that, I'm thinking, hey man, this guy's got a lot of gas in his tank. He's definitely improving his stand up. He's Chris Weidman's main training partner. They've got a terrific camp out there with Sarah Longo, and but Tom was Tom, man. He was calm. He was relaxed. They didn't let him do the funny walkout or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, did you see his weigh-in?
No, I heard he had all the pro wrestlers were loving the weigh-ins. I could see all the retweets from him.
He wore every single thing that Reebok sent him and took it off bit by bit. It was awesome. It was.
Yeah, that's classic Lawler. But yeah, Tom had spent some time in Cuba working with the Olympic boxing team down there, and the Cubans know how to box for sure. He's always had good wrestling, good ground game, and you could see, even moving away from John and drawing him in and then hitting him with that lead hook right on the button, he's got a ton of power. He really does have a ton of power, and his technique is there. So that was just a huge win for him. I'm biased as hell because I love Tom, but that was a massive, massive victory. He got the huge $50,000 bonus. But a bonus is a bonus, so I know it was definitely needed considering he hasn't fought in a couple years. But yeah. Awesome day
for Tom. Only got probably $2,500 or maybe $5,000 from Reebok as his main sponsor.
Oh yeah,
and that really killed me because I did watch the weigh-in, and it was great because I honestly believe Tom Lawler is just one of the funniest human beings. I love having him around. He just cracks me up, and he's ridiculously intelligent. He plays it down, which is funny when people don't know him. And so he'll play down his intelligence, and then they believe he's stupid, and then they'll call him a what did he get called in Italy? A nitwit? Oh, a simpleton.
Yeah.
He got called a simpleton by one of the Italian women, and you could see he just immediately got angry because he wants to downplay his intelligence, but you better not believe it for a minute.
Yeah.
But seeing that fight was that's why I love this sport. Because if it was boxing, you'd know basically who's going to win within the first couple rounds. But in MMA, at any time, there can be that one shot that changes the whole game. And I was sitting on the couch watching it. I jumped up screaming. My girlfriend actually thought that I had hurt myself. She comes running into the room saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Lawler, he made it." Because he was taking a beating. And I'm sitting there just going, oh, my God, this is just not going to end well. I really want my friend to do well. He's had such a long layoff. He's got a kid on the way. He needs this money. And then to land that shot was just amazing.
So then also, to your layoff, he's fighting John, who's, top 15, maybe top 20, 205er. And he did remarkably well once he started to find his timing, once he found his range, once he knew how to react. What does the rest of the 205 division look like for him as he's redeveloping this skill set that's been dormant for the last 2 years? Who would you guys like to see him go up against next in the 205 division? Or would you like to see him go back down to 85? Because I don't think he's going to do that. I think he wants to.
Yeah, he's not dropping to 85. He's going to stay at 205 just because the weight cut's easier. He said it in the post-fight interview that he's too old to keep going up and down. He wants to stay at 205 and just put a little bit more weight on. That said, we had already spoke prior to the fight, and he said, once I beat John, I'm going to call out Jimmy Manawa. So he wants to start taking out all the guys who beat me. And honestly, I think that is a terrific, terrific fight for him because Jimmy's another guy that's ranked in the top 15. And just to clarify, Kurt, they had the rankings. John is number 15 before that fight going into it, so he's for sure top 15. Now moving forward, I think they give him another guy that's just outside the top 10. Jimmy Manuwa fits that perfectly. And Jimmy, being as incredible as a striker as he is, he just doesn't have the wrestling background that John does. So, I mean, if I was able to take him down, I know Tom's going to be able to take him down and really grind on him. He's been working a lot on his jiu-jitsu with Vinny Magalish out at Syndicate MMA in Las Vegas. So he's got, you know, one of the best 205ers in the world at his disposal to work with consistently. And I really like that fight. I hope they give it to him.
I like that fight a lot too. I think that if Tom fights that fight that you're discussing, it's his all night long. But you just never, as you know, Manuwa has got fast feet. So yeah.
I would just, if I was to critique this fight and talk to Tom about moving forward, I would like to see him, because he's focusing so much on his hands right now, use those hands in combination with his takedowns. And especially if you have the ability to take down your opponent almost at will, never take a step back. Because you're at his boxing range, and now you struggle to get through that boxing range into your wrestling range. You don't get the takedown, then you back up again. That always kills me. It's like if I have a baseball bat, and you're coming at me. You either want to be outside or inside. You don't slowly creep in and then slowly creep out. You don't slowly get past these punches and then back out and get hit on the way out again. Throw that combination, come into the clinch, stay into the clinch, use your combinations to then shoot your takedown. And staying in a boxer's face the entire time, a kickboxer, is going to make it really tough for him. Fighting somebody when you're backing up the entire time while they're putting that forward pressure on you is really tough. And that's his game. That's his gift.
A really interesting thing happened at the fights on Saturday night was the Joe Lauzon Gomi fight. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Lauzon decided Gomi had enough, and he just got up on his own, walked off. Herb Dean didn't even wave off the fight for about 4 to 6 seconds longer. I haven't seen and it wasn't a walk-off knockoff, where Jay Lau had back mount, was raining down punches, and then he said no more. I'm done.
It was awesome.
Go ahead, Kyle.
I was just gonna say I thought it was beautiful. Every ref in there has made mistakes at different times, some worse than others. I think any good ref, if he's been in there long enough, he's been accused of stopping the fight too early, and he's definitely been accused of letting the fight go too long. Herb Dean is no exception to that. So I think he might have been watching it go a little bit long, and Joe Lauzon felt like, listen, this guy's just eating shots. I'm done here. I don't need to finish him. And he stood up, he looked around, and the crowd went nuts. And then Herb Dean it was the funniest thing, because when he finally decided, it was like he woke up in the cage, like, oh shit, the fight's over now. No more. He's had enough. It's like, oh yeah, I'll do my job now. Okay.
I love it, man, because every fighter, you get into that zone when you're hitting somebody, and you just want to keep on hitting them, and you have that beast coming out from inside you, but to actually have the presence of mind, and Gomi Lauzon was a huge fan of his opponent. He's like, I've been looking up to this guy for so long, and now we have to fight each other. So, of course, he's going to take every opportunity to show the respect to his opponent. That's what martial arts is really all about. I may be better than you, you may be better than me, but there comes a point where there's no need for unnecessary damage that's going to affect my health in the long term.
Big time.
Awesome. The fight after that, I think, was the Felder and Edson Barboza fight. A couple of 170ers. I have not seen that much power in people trading punches in I don't know how long. And I even had pointed out earlier that those shots look like they would have dropped heavyweights. I mean, those guys were banging, and it wasn't this sloppy backyard brawl. It was pure technique, great Muay Thai, and just very, very, very clean and measured shots. And I think both of them I can't think of anybody right now in the 170-pound division that would think like, oh, I really want to fight either one of those guys.
Well, I disagree with you. I think a really good wrestler might look at these guys and say, hey, as awesome as the stand-up was, nobody even attempted takedowns for the most part. I think Edson might have attempted one takedown, but you know, a lot of wrestlers had gripes that, listen, nobody's even shooting on each other here. Beautiful stand-up is negated by the fact that there's a complete lack of wrestling, like it doesn't even exist. That said, both these guys know where their strengths are. Both these guys want to keep it standing. And, well, I got a pop-up here. Both these guys are doing great. Damn pop-ups. I'd love to fight, man. I didn't even know. What's the ginger's name? I don't even know his name. I'd never even heard of him before the fight. Never seen him before. And he was spectacular. It was so much fun to watch. And it wasn't because they were just standing trading. It was because exactly what you said. Speed and power and technique from both of them the entire time. Even the spinning back kick to the nuts that Edson threw was nasty. It was the nastiest spinning back kick, and it landed perfect on the cup. You know, but I mean, the whole fight was just phenomenal, and everybody wanted more, and that speaks volumes about both these guys. And obviously, there's going to be wrestlers that want a piece of them, but man, I give them full credit because that's why you go in there. You lay it all on the line, so people give you that respect because neither one of those guys made that much money, and it's certainly. Obviously, they're hoping for some bonuses and things like that. But, I mean, in the end, you want people to think highly of you. That way, you're a commodity. You're somebody that people want to see. And then that grows your career in the sport. And certainly, I think both those guys accomplished that.
Yeah, we'll see how the takedowns play out in the future. It just wasn't displayed in this fight. Maybe that's something they're working on. So to get to the UFC now and stay in the big show, you've got to be well-rounded at least to some extent, unless, of course, they're buying you your title. Not like that happens very often, but on occasion. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well,
I'm not saying that anyone that can shoot a double leg takedown knows that they finally have a chance at the title against McGregor, but I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the fight after that, which I think should have happened prior to it, was the Miesha Tate Jessica Eye fight. Is after Felder and Barbosa, and I'm a huge fan of women's MMA. I think that they're really good, especially the lighter weights. They're fast, they're quick, they're there to fight. They're not there to screw around. But the Tate and Eye fight, those girls looked like they were fighting underwater. They were slow, they were sluggish. Their conditioning was there, but it wasn't a beautiful display of anything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, no, go ahead, buddy. You're the guest. You're the guest.
The guest of honor. The guest will speak. I completely agree. You know, for everything that and I love listening and I follow a lot of the MMA sports commentators and sports writers. You know, the guys that analyze the fights, and I respect some of their opinions. A lot of their opinions I think are crap. One of the things it's always funny to me when people try to paint the picture of, oh, here's the silver lining, you know, and it's like, golly, man, somebody just come out and say it. People were saying and tweeting that the best thing about Miesha Tate is her heart, is that she never quits. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. But when I watch Ronda fight, I see someone that's skilled in all areas. She's really improved her stand-up. She's got nasty knees. Her boxing's always getting better. Her footwork's incredible. Judo was always there from day one. Her armbar was always there from day one. But now we're seeing her develop as a fighter. She's miles ahead of everyone else. When I watch that fight and they say, oh, the winner of this fight gets to fight Ronda, I see Jessica Eye with great hands, and that's it. Totally one-dimensional. She can't stop the slowest, sloppiest takedowns on earth from Tate. Tate's getting cracked in the face and then dive bombing in slow motion for her legs and getting the takedown. And everybody's like, wow, she's just so tenacious. She won't stop. And it's like, no, man, this girl doesn't know how to defend a takedown. And the other one's getting smashed, so she has to go there. And, you know, I mean, not to take anything away from him because it was a fun fight to watch, no question. But when you're talking about high level, when you're talking about co-main event, when you're talking about who's going to go on and have a title shot, and obviously this is their This is her third fight coming up. Nobody wants to see that fight. Nobody cares about that fight. The UFC marketing engine is doing such a great job promoting this this next title fight with Ronda. Nobody cares about that fight either. Nobody cares about this other girl who's ranked number 7, who's heavy-handed and all that. No, there's one fight that people want to see, and that's with Cyborg. And even if they can't bring in Cyborg to fight Ronda off the bat, just talking about Cyborg and Miesha Tate at a catchweight of 140, that stimulates far more interest than seeing a third fight where Tate's going to get just annihilated by Ronda. She's not on her level. Down the road she could be. Who knows? But not right now. So I think that the fact that that's what we were looking at as the light at the end of the tunnel from this fight, that just made it that much worse to me.
Well, don't you think possibly with the UFC banning IVs post weigh-in, that there's really no way that Cyborg can even get to 145?
I think she'd get to 145. I'd like to see her do 140 against someone else, like the catchweight with Miesha Tate. That's a phenomenal thing to see if she can do a catchweight at 140, because you're not asking that much of Ronda to do 140. And they could have a 145 division. They could steal all the women from Invicta like they've done in the past and just add that division. Cyborg could be the champion of that division, and you could have champion versus champion at the catchweight of 140. They've done it in the past. There's no belt lost. So if Ronda loses, it's, hey, I went up in weight. Doesn't matter. I'm still the champ of 135. And it's just, it's just one of those fights where you watch it and you're like, yeah, everyone wanted to see BJ versus GSP. People want to see Ronda fight somebody who is a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger than her, even if it means going up in weight, because she's annihilated everyone else. So, time to sack up and face somebody that's a little bit tougher in a division above you.
Yeah, right now Ronda is she's a mixture of Royce Gracie and Mike Tyson. When Royce Gracie came into the UFC or started the UFC, everyone else sucked. Nobody had any idea, I could make a living at fighting. They hadn't been training like that. And then you have Mike Tyson, who is such a devastatingly phenomenal champion who just moves inside, uppercut, hook, knockout in 5 seconds. So you have this combination of this woman, Ronda Rousey, who's incredibly devastating at what she does, but she's facing all of Royce Gracie UFC 1 opponents. These are all people that just realized 3 years ago, oh, I can do this for a living instead of just a hobby. Oh, I can be on TV. Maybe I can change my future. As opposed to Ronda, who was being attacked by her mother when she was a little girl. I'm attacking you. I'm choking you. She's been doing this her entire life, fighting people that have been doing this for 3 years. I would love if we could cryogenically freeze Ronda for 5, maybe even 10 years and let the rest of the entire class catch up with her. Then we're going to see some great fights. But right now, she's just so overwhelming. And, yeah, I have no desire to see a Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey 3 fight. It's what has changed. And as I was watching that fight as well, I was thinking to myself, man, they're just not that good. As I'm watching this, yeah, they're better than your average person. But if it was a man that had that same skill set, he wouldn't be in the UFC. It's because, again, they're just coming up. They're coming into their own and realizing that, yes, this can be a career. Yes, there is a division for me, but it's going to take years for that skill set to catch up to where, unlike with Ronda, when I watch her fights, I am captured on that because she is one of the best in the world at judo, potentially the best in the UFC at judo. So I want to see people that are better than me. I want to see people that are incredibly skilled doing what they do best, not someone that, well, we had to find a matchup for Ronda somewhere, so we brought in this person. No, I want to see good matchups.
Yeah, I think even the Ronda and Betch Correa fight, I think the odds are like plus 200, or excuse me, plus 1,200 for Ronda, which means you would have to bet $1,200 to win 100. And Miesha and Ronda 3, those odds have got to be closer to plus 2,000. Miesha just doesn't have a chance. It doesn't seem like anyone in that division can do anything that Ronda doesn't allow them to do. She's pretty impressive. Main event was TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão. TJ won his second fight over Barão, stoppage in the 4th round. And then it looks like they'll be fighting Cruz next. what I thought was interesting is that TJ, in both of his wins, it appeared like he was attempting to be Dominic Cruz in order to beat Renan Barão. And can TJ beat Dominic Cruz by trying to be Dominic Cruz? Because I don't think anybody fights that style better than Cruz does. And I just don't know how TJ can get past him and retain that title if they fight.
Yeah, I'm so pumped for this. I really hope that Cruz is healthy and they can make this fight, and that he can stay healthy in his camp, and we can see it actually come to fruition. Everybody on planet Earth knew that TJ Dillashaw was just going to run through Barão. I was thinking he was going to get the finish in round 3 or 4. He got it in 4. You know, he's just so much faster, and he really had the game plan right. You know, when you see somebody smoke a guy for every minute of 5 rounds, you really understand, like, that guy's got his number for whatever reason. Stylistically, game plan wise, he had his number, and that didn't change in the second fight. Moving forward, it's interesting to see a couple of things. TJ in the post-fight interview talked about how he feels that he has way more power than Cruz does, and that'll be the difference. And I don't think that's going to be the difference, because what Cruz lacks in power, he easily makes up for with his reach. And if you've ever fought somebody that has that much more reach than you, it's a big deal. It really is a big deal, especially when you're talking about footwork, creating angles, and your timing and spacing and distancing. When you start getting tagged on the outside from a punch you didn't think would land, or as you enter thinking you're going to change levels and get inside on a guy and you eat a knee to the chest, that changes the scope of how you fight. It changes your entry point for your boxing, for your takedowns, for everything. And it's not to say that I don't think TJ can win. I think TJ should be the favorite in this fight, but I think it should be a lot closer than minus 1,200. I think it should be damn near even odds, and I feel like Cruz, if he's healthy, can certainly win the fight.
Well, and TJ will have Duane Ludwig in his corner, who's been with him the entire time. And Duane Bang Ludwig is just a phenomenal coach, phenomenal fighter. I think he's really good. He's very scientific in his approach with the fight. So if anybody can develop a game-winning game plan, I think it's going to be Duane.
Definitely. He's a very intelligent coach, knows how to coach to the other fighter's weaknesses. But he got a little bit of flack this last week because he used to be the head coach at Team Alpha Male. He was terminated by Uriah Faber, even though TJ kept him on as personal coach, and TJ would fly out to Denver, where Duane's school is, and train with him out here, getting ready for these kind of fights. But Bang said that he doesn't believe anyone at Team Alpha Male even wants to be a champion, which is a pretty bold and kind of a dick thing to say. Because you don't know what's in the heart of anyone, and he's retired. He was a pro fighter, so he can certainly talk some shit against other fighters because he's at least done it. But I thought it was a pretty unintelligent comment.
Wow, that's all news to me, because I had heard that Duane had left, and I'm sure this was just the PC politically correct statement made by him when he left. But I heard that he left to open his gym in another state, and that's why he had to say, hey, sorry guys, I love you all, but I'm not going to be your coach, so I can go on and better myself by having my own gym. And that I would go back out there and continue to train you guys, specifically for fights and camps leading up to the big title fights. But the fact that he's come out and said this definitely changes the outlook on things. And I wonder too, obviously Uriah has taken a catchweight fight against Frankie Edgar. Now they're making him the coach on the next Ultimate Fighter. At least the UFC has said that he's good for TV, and it's not like Frankie Edgar. It's like Frankie Edgar. My God, this is a whole side note. Sorry to get sidetracked here, but Uriah's not going to fight TJ. They said the only way they would do that is for the right amount of money, and then of course Uncle Dana, scratches his paws. Oh, we'll make that happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Not when they keep giving Uriah, big time fights like the one in Manila against Frankie, or when they make him a coach of the Ultimate Fighter and draw out his title shot at 45 against the newly crowned king. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like I don't see these guys fighting each other and they are training partners, and they work hard together. But I see that as a riff, man. I see that as a big deal. Like, is TJ going to hit mitts with him at his house? Is he going to set up mats in the garage? Like, where do you have this guy come in and coach if you still plan on doing all your camps at Alpha Male and having those guys as your training partners, and then he's saying this? If he's saying this about all the guys you train with, that's a pretty big statement to make, and still show your face, when you're coming to town.
Well, I wonder what the backstory was on that statement, because it can be said in a lot of ways, and I'm sure I've said much worse things than that about fighters, that you don't want to be a champion. Well, of course, everybody wants to be a champion, but the real statement is you don't want to do what it takes to become a champion. Are you willing to quit going out on the weekends for 5 years? Are you willing to give up all of these fun things that you would like to do to really fulfill that? My first amateur fight, for 3 months, all I did was eat, sleep, work, and train. That was it.
And
for 3 months. I held it for 3 months. That's why I was so angry going in.
Yeah, right.
that was the best post-fight.
You were like, Bushido.
You got the tap. I wonder, because knowing Dwayne, we all know the pathway to being a champion. It's sacrifice. And a lot of people are willing to do that to get there. And then afterwards, it's the same road. You don't step off on it. Now you're a champion. You get to live your life a different way. You get to train a different way. No, you still have to put in the hours and the work. And that's why Ronda's been so successful. She, as dominant as she is, she's not satisfied. She wants to do more. Same thing with Couture. Came in as a great wrestler, took beginning MMA classes, took beginning boxing classes so he could expand his game. So I wonder if Dwayne is really saying these guys don't want to be a champion, or if he's saying these guys don't want to sacrifice what's necessary to become a champion. Everybody wants to have the post-fight party. Not as many guys want to actually do what it takes to get to the post-fight party.
True, that's a very good point. Very good point.
Thanks, Kurt. I appreciate that.
Hey, anytime, buddy, anytime. One last question before we move on to some other stuff that's been happening in the MMA world. Do you guys think Renan Barão should move to 55?
There's a couple things with that. One, it's an easier weight cut. Obviously, with doing away with the IVs and things of that nature, it might make it better for him. But his teammates there, Jose, or no, he's at 35. You're talking about 55? That's 2 weight classes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Should he
move
move
up
to 45,
right? Yeah, so moving up to 45, his teammates there, Jose Aldo, obviously the UFC is doing everything they can to bend this guy over and act like he doesn't exist. He spoke out about the Reebok deal, which we'll get into shortly. And after speaking out about the Reebok deal, the UFC slams him. He comes out and he says, oh, hey, I'm a hurt rib. I think I need to pull out of the fight. They quickly say, nope, we checked. We sent a doctor down. His rib's fine. Then he has to release an X-ray that shows his rib's actually broken and say, no, as originally stated, I'm out of the fight. It's a legitimate injury. And, without hesitation, they want to strip him of the title. And initially, they didn't even say it was for the interim championship. They said a new champion will be crowned. And it wasn't even going to be the interim title. And then obviously there's enough backlash from people saying, wait a minute, this guy's the champ. 6 months ago you're talking about him as pound for pound the best in the world. You're going to act like he doesn't even exist now and crown a new champion because he's got a whole country on his back. There's a lot that goes into that. And I'm not taking away from Conor McGregor, but I will say that just based on the fact that Jose Aldo's there and he does have to wait until Uriah and McGregor get done filming The Ultimate Fighter, and then possibly Frankie Edgar gets the winner, which easily could be Uriah, and then Jose Aldo gets that guy. I don't know that Renan Barão is going to want to wait that long for a title shot. If he's not fighting for a title, he might as well stay in the division that he knows he could smoke everyone in. There's not a lot of reason, in my opinion, for him to move up and wait, unless it really is a struggle for him to make the weight at 35.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If you're not winning like you want to at a lower weight class, it doesn't get easier when the guys get bigger. Just stay in, fix your holes, because he was a dominant champion for a long time. Fix those holes, get back on the horse, and figure out what you need to do to win.
So let's talk about that Reebok deal. couple weeks ago, I was at Las Vegas for the U.S. Nationals Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament.
Congratulations, Kurt. You took gold. You're the champion.
I did. I took gold in the super old man division, but I don't care, man. As long as I can still go out there and compete, I'm happy. I'm very happy. But it coincided with the UFC Fan Expo, and it was kind of interesting because the grapplers, the jiu-jitsu guys, got to go into the tournament early and walk around the expo before the expo fans were even able to come in, and there was even a huge Reebok setup, and they had a ton of gear there, and I went up and said, hey, I would really like to buy a Tom Lawler jersey, and they did not have one. They only had the kits, I guess they're called, for guys that are fighting, that were fighting that weekend, and it was the Conor McGregor Chad Mendez fight. I could have bought a blank Reebok shirt and ironed on Tom Filthy Lawler's info. They would have done it there for me, but it wasn't going to be original, which is supposed to have been one of the pillars of the Reebok deal. You know, when they presented this, they presented it as, you know, fighter input, originality, still individualistic. But it's not that. So you guys having retired, not really having to worry about this, you know, what are your outside ideas? Or if you guys have spoken to fighters that are, you know, still in the UFC, what have they said about it off the record?
Well, I'm going to let Nate take most of this, but let me slip in a few words right before he goes off.
I got to stretch out first.
Yeah, warm up, Nate. I'll slip in a few. All right, first, Kurt, please allow me to address this one thing. Talking about the idea behind the Reebok deal and the idea of originality and people being able to get on board with these kits and buy things and support their guys is 1,000% meaningless. Because if you're truly about supporting fighters and getting behind them, then I'm going to buy a Todd Duffy shirt that Todd made, and he gets the 90% of that money. I'm going to buy a Cain Velasquez Affliction shirt because they've been supporting Cain for 3 years, and they've made Cain's own shirts for every fight. That's the shirt that I want, the shirt that he walks out in. Not the Reebok deal that pays the champions $40,000. The champions. And obviously you've had guys, everyone's heard the story about Brennan Schaub. Brennan Schaub was getting $100,000 per fight from one sponsor. And that's one dude who's not in the top 5 of the heavyweight division. And, you know, hey, terrific fighter, obviously, you know, but I mean, you look at these guys, he's one of many, many, many fighters that was making the vast majority of his income from sponsors, and now he's not even getting what the champs get. He ain't getting $40,000. He's getting 10 at most, or maybe I think 12,500 was the new thing they were going to say for the mid-tier guys, you know, and then the bottom-tier guys aren't making anything either. So there's not a single fighter in the UFC that's happy with the deal. Nobody's going to come out and say it. I applauded Jose Aldo for speaking up on behalf of the guys. I think a lot more of the champions and belt holders should do it because they're in a position where they really can't be touched or messed with. The fans will demand, even though Aldo is stripped of the title, they'll demand his return. And, you know, just more people need to speak up about this and really say, like, hey, this is complete crap. All the money's not going to the fighters, like Dana continues to say. Obviously, there's a handshake deal going on just to allow Reebok there in the first place. I don't blame Reebok for this at all, but I blame 100% of this on Dana and the way that they handle their business, and nobody's benefiting from it other than Reebok and the UFC. Take it away, Nate.
That pretty much says it all. I got nothing else. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh, I could go on for days on this subject. It's a joke. And the question I always ask is, I hear this, I heard it from Dana. On occasion, I'll hear from somebody that will say, well, this is what's best for the sport. And I always ask the same question. How? How is this what's best for the sport? Oh, it'll attract mainstream sponsors. You mean like Nike? Oh, Nike was a sponsor in the UFC, but now they're gone because Reebok is there. And One, who sponsored me, well, now they're gone. You had thousands, potentially tens of thousands sponsors coming to advertise in the UFC, picking and choosing the fighters that they liked best, that they felt represented their brand, and then taking that fighter's likeness back home with them to their business. Would you rather have one company with a limited budget talking about you and your brand, or would you rather have an unlimited number of companies with an unlimited number of budgets talking about your brand? When I was sponsored by And One, it was front page news on MSNBC.com. Everybody thought, this is crazy. You have a pure basketball shoe company sponsoring a UFC fighter. It was such a mind-blowing thing that people would realize, well, it's just marketing. Now we're reaching the same demographic that hasn't been touched before. And One actually ran a full 2-page spread ad of myself and One shoes in a basketball shoe magazine. Not in Fighter Monthly or whatever the latest rag is, the UFC magazine. That's preaching to the choir. All of those people already know about the UFC. They already buy it. No, you want to reach the demographic that's not the hardcore MMA fan. You want to increase these things. And that was something that I was able to do with my career, being sponsored by NuVasive, the back surgery company that allowed me to get back into the ring. It was such a mind-blowing thing. I could have a spinal fusion surgery and then return to fighting. They wanted the world to know we supported this fighter on his way back into the cage. So they put XLIF, the name of the procedure, on my shorts. They put NuVasive across the back of my shorts. They brought surgeons in to watch the fights. They had big get-togethers where the entire company, hundreds of people, would watch this pay-per-view. We're talking about people in the medical device industry, not down at your local gym, really growing the demographic into all of these other people. And then you look at my last fight in sponsorships, I made around $45,000. According to the Reebok UFC deal, I would have made $5,000. So even if you don't care that I use that money to pay my mortgage, to feed my daughter, to set up a college account for her, if all you care about is fights and how good of a fight they are, well, think about this. That $45,000 also goes to my fight camp. It's not like the NFL, MLB, or NBA, where the teams get together and they pay for all of the training. Every individual fighter pays for their own camp. A low-end camp will cost $5,000. A good camp will cost closer to $10,000. Well, now, instead of having that $45,000 to pay for that camp, I have $5,000. That doesn't even pay for my camp. So you're going to get a fighter who wasn't able to get the massages he needed, go to the chiropractor, get the treatments, train with the best conditioning coach, have a jiu-jitsu black belt coach to work with, have a Muay Thai coach, have a boxing coach. All of those things go away. Because even if they didn't want to get paid, like I had a chiropractor that worked on me all the time, didn't want money. He was just happy seeing his logo on my banner. Well, now that's not an option. So then I'd have to pay out of pocket. Well, I just had a 90% pay cut. So now I can't go get my neck adjusted. Now I can't get the massage that I need so I can fight better. Taking away this money is so short-sighted, and it just amazes me when fans don't comprehend this. Because I've had people tell me, if I don't like my job, I just quit. First off, is it your dream job? Did you train for 10 or 15 years to take this job? Are you bringing in your employer billions of dollars, $500 million every single year to do your job? And when you decide, you know what, I'm just not happy, as the boss changes the regulations day by day by day. Because when I started, it was, we can't pay you very much, but you can have whatever sponsors you want. Well, then it was, well, we need to approve your sponsors. Well, you know, we've got Harley-Davidson, so you can't have Yamaha, Kawasaki, anything like that. That's our main, you can't have any contradicting sponsors. Now you can't thank your sponsors afterwards. Fans don't want to hear about that shit. They just want to see who you're going to fight next. Then it was, well, your sponsors need to pay us $50,000 for the pleasure of sponsoring you. No, wait, $100,000 for the pleasure of sponsoring you. So when I see these fighters that are saying, oh my God, I'm so thankful that Reebok gave me $2,500, I always look and see how long they've been fighting in the UFC. Oh, 1 year. So you don't remember what it was like 8 years ago when you could have any sponsor that would pay you any amount of money. A good friend of mine, I probably shouldn't mention his name, was sponsored by Dethroned for his shorts a few years ago, 5-6 years ago. Got paid $12,250 just to wear Dethroned shorts. His latest fight, he got paid $250 from Dethroned. Why is that? Well, because all of those short sponsors each have to pay the UFC $100,000 for that privilege. If your budget is $105,000, well, $100,000 goes to the UFC. You've got $5,000 to spend on the fighters. Before there was the tax, that $105,000 could go to 10 different fighters. Everybody's getting over $10,000 for this. But how did it come about? It was because the mainstream sponsors of the UFC went to Dana and said, Tap Out said, well, we're spending millions of dollars advertising on the ring and on the posts, and yet this guy's coming in, DeThroat's coming in and offering $5,000, $10,000 for the fighter to wear the shorts. We're getting shortchanged. So how can we make it look like we're getting our money's worth without actually being the topic of ridicule and getting mocked? So then they implemented the sponsorship tax, which was so phenomenally interesting because I was at one of the UFC MMA expos where Dana sits down and gives us all this great advice on how to be a professional. And somebody asked, what was it? Well, how did this all come about? And Dana gets up there and says, because we allowed a sponsor like Affliction to sponsor these fighters, and then they began a competing fighting organization. We need to make sure that never happens again, so we're implementing the sponsorship tax. And I sat there and I thought, is anybody actually buying this? All you would have to do in the contract is say, you want to sponsor any of our fighters, you can't start a conflicting pay-per-view MMA organization. But that's another one of those statements that nobody asks the follow-up question. This really doesn't make sense to me. How can we make this better? And
or
Dana
if you do ask that question and you have the balls to actually have a brain, then they yank your credentials. You're never at a UFC event again. You never get to cover the sport unless you're doing it from sitting in front of your TV, and that's it. Don't worry about it. Don't bother showing up. You're not getting tickets. You're not getting a press pass, and you're not allowed in. And if you don't get fired by your company, we'll 86 the whole company too. That's the strong arm tactics that you're dealing with, and that's really why you see Dana just go off on guys when they're in these post-fight press conferences if they ask him a question that he doesn't like. Like, what do you think about Jose Aldo's comments about the Reebok deal? That guy, the messenger, gets shot right then just for bringing up the question.
Yeah, it's just pure insanity to me that people will actually buy this crap, and it was nice to see the fan support around Stitch because they could finally see somebody who's just a blue-collar guy who's working at something benefiting the fights, benefiting the fighters, and then he gets dumped on, whereas they couldn't understand it from a fighter's perspective.
Quick, Nate, why don't you give the backstory on what happened with Stitch Duran, the cornerman, cutman for the UFC?
Well, Stitch has been around for a very long time in the UFC. He's one of boxing and MMA's best cutman, probably the most famous cornerman, cutman in the world. Not only has he done all the big boxing matches, all the big MMA fights, he's also in quite a few movies playing himself. He's that guy. So when the Reebok deal came into effect, not only did it slash 90-95% of the sponsorship dollars that were going to the fighters, it also took away 100% of what Stitch was getting because he could very easily put a little logo, a bad boy logo on his vest, and they would pay him because they see this is marketing. I need to get my name out there. Well, with the Reebok deal, he doesn't get that opportunity. And so he very respectfully in an interview said, yeah, I'm losing money here. I might have to do some more boxing matches. This is how I feed my family. And then he gets the call. And I reference the call all the time when I'm talking to people. Whenever you say something that Dana doesn't like, you get the call. You need to shut the F up and get back in line or you're not going to like the consequences. And that's what's happened to Stitch. He got the call, but not even from Dana. He had one of the underlings call him, your services are no longer needed here. All because he said, yeah, this deal isn't good for me. I just lost a bunch of money. There's no compensation. And then Reebok comes out after their major backlash, and Reebok says, it wasn't us, man. It was the UFC. Really? So you couldn't have done a side deal with the cutmen. So sponsors have no control over this whatsoever. That's ridiculous. Very easily they could have made a separate deal, or they could have made sure we need to make an allotment for this. But my favorite solution to this whole Reebok deal, but if you believe Dana, this is all about the fighters. The UFC is not making a dime off of this. Give the fighters an opportunity to opt out. You know what, Reebok, thank you very much. I'm making a lot more money from my sponsors, so I'm going to go ahead and stay with them. Instead of a socialist dictator situation going on, then Reebok could say, oh, Affliction wants to pay you 10 grand, we're only offering you 2,500. Have a good day, enjoy it. Or we'll match it, or we'll beat it. Or the new guy coming in after the sponsorships have been slaughtered, who's saying, I don't have any sponsors, I'll happily take this $2,500. Mission accomplished. Now you've got your advertisement right there. If it's really about the fighters, give them the opportunity to opt out. Or maybe have a big Reebok logo, and still you can have your other sponsors as well. But it's not about the fighters, it's about the bottom line. And anybody that tells me Dana's not making a dime off of this, I say, really? So you're telling me these UFC fight kits are going to be sold all around the world with this huge UFC logo across the front, a big Reebok logo. Somewhere on there may be the fighter's name, but none of that's going to the UFC? Not a dime of that? No, you're very naive.
Well, so here's a counterpoint, and boy, I know I'm going to get it.
Bring it, son.
So the UFC is a business. The business has the CEO, the president, the CFO. It's a business. Like any business, its job is to make money, as much money as possible. Exxon wants to make as much as they can. They're going to they're only going to pay the oil drill workers as much as they need to in order for them to stay there. Why can't the CEO and the president of the company say, we're going to implement this new uniform policy? The NFL has it, basketball, every sports agency, with the exception of professional wrestling, has some type of a uniform policy, dress code even. Why can't the UFC implement that in their business, and why does that have to get criticized?
Kyle, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I have one quick thought, just so I can remain in the conversation here. When you bring up all the other major sports, there's an easy correlation if you want to compare them. And even just comparing MMA to boxing, you start comparing numbers. When the NFL went on strike most recently, I think it was in 2005 or 2007, and they had the Honorable Judge Doty presiding over everything. They were going to bat for 55%. They wanted 55% for the players and 45% for the owners. With that said, I think it's estimated that somewhere between 12 and 15% of the revenue goes to the fighters and the rest goes to the owners in the UFC. So if we're talking similar pay scales as the NFL, the NBA, MLB, I don't think people raise that big of a stink. But considering the atrociously low level of pay that fighters get, with exception to some of the guys that have retained the title, because you don't even get a piece of the pay-per-view anymore winning the title. You have to defend the title to get a piece of the pay-per-view. So a lot's changed in contracts and things like that, and it's very hard to hold these guys accountable. The worst part is there's no availability to take your product elsewhere. I can't say, you know what, UFC, you're only willing to pay me 15 grand for my next fight. I'm going to shop around a little bit and see what Bellator wants to do or what ONE FC wants to do. No, I'm locked in. I have no ability to shop around, no ability to see who else is going to pay me. In boxing, it's an open market. The Muhammad Ali Act allows me to shop around. If I don't like what Don King's doing, I can go to somebody else. And with the UFC and the way that they have their contracts set, it's all or nothing. They have 100% control. So when you look at it from that respect, I signed a 4-fight deal before my last fight. I lose, I retire, and they still send me the "you're fired" paperwork. So it's like it's all up to them. They decide what's going on, and without that ability to be paid a fair wage, and I say a fair wage, how I determine a fair wage is I compare it to other combat sports. Strikeforce was paying 80% of their payroll out to the fighters. It's well known that boxing and other combat sports pay at least 70 to 80% in most of their events. So to give out 12 to 15%, and then you take away the majority of fighters' income, the majority of what helps fighters get through camps, because even when the small guy isn't getting paid 100 grand like Brendan Schaub, he's still getting the chiropractic for free. He's still getting the massage therapy for free. He's still got a sponsor that's giving him supplements so they don't have to go out and spend $500 a month on supplements. All these things are a factor at every level of the sport. And when you take that away from the fighters, in addition to the fact that they're already dicking everyone on pay, it's a real issue.
It really always amuses me when people want to compare team sports to the UFC or MMA. And they always say the same thing. The NFL wears uniforms, and to Kyle's point, well, let's not just pick and choose the arguments that are going to help support what you want to prove. Let's look at the whole picture. So you want to have everyone wear a uniform just like the NFL or just like the NBA. Cool. So I assume then you're going to help put together a players association. You're going to help put together retirement benefits. You're going to increase the minimum wage from $10,000 to $500,000 for the worst fighter in the organization. NBA players get to wear whatever shoes they want, make a large amount of money from those sponsors. So can the UFC fighters now wear whatever gloves they want to wear or put whatever logo on? You can't pick and choose the arguments that support you, especially when it's apples and oranges. Every other individual professional sport out there, golfers, they have their own clubs. They definitely have a code of what they can and can't wear as far as the look of it, but it's not dictated. Everyone here at the PGA has to wear Nike. Everyone has to wear these shoes. No, in the NBA, same thing. You can wear whatever shoes you want. In tennis, they can wear whatever clothes they want, use whatever racket they want. All these other individual sports, and then to hear Dana say, this is what's best for the sport. How? How is this what's best for the sport? Give me one example. I mean, would NASCAR be so much bigger if they weren't wearing those gaudy outfits with the sponsors all over them? I mean, Pacquiao Mayweather, they only got 4 million pay-per-view buys, but, you know, Pacquiao made $2.5 million off the sponsors on his shorts alone. Can you imagine if he didn't have any sponsors on his shorts? They would have sold like 6 million pay-per-view buys. No, that's just ridiculous bullshit that people put out there because they think it sounds good with no facts whatsoever. You know what? Bill Cosby raped me. Prove me wrong. I'm suing Bill Cosby. You know, it ruined my life. Just because I make a statement doesn't mean it's true. I actually have to have supporting facts that prove these things.
Well,
so
hold on.
if one sponsor is better, one sponsor is better for the fighters. You tell me how, goddammit. Tell me now.
In all fairness, it's quite possible you could have been raped by Bill Cosby because that number is pretty fucking huge.
It was a different time.
All right. So speaking of which, you know, you're talking about the fighter union, and just for the record, I completely disagree with the Reebok deal. I just wanted to throw out some of the counterpoints. The one thing that I did find interesting that it was Reebok versus Under Armour or anything like that is that Nate and I both grew up in the 80s. Kyle grew up in the late 90s. But for us,
out of here. I'm 1982, pal. Don't lump me into the 90s, kids. It disgusted me. I think I just threw up in my mouth. 90s.
Reebok was always a feminine product. It was the product of aerobics. I didn't know any guys at school that wore Reebok. You know, they wore Diadoras, Adidas, Nike, Puma. You know, no guy wore Reebok, and so I thought it was really interesting that when they brought this in as the sponsor, I mean, I was legitimately confused because I thought it was a woman's brand. But and also I can't see Reebok renewing this deal in 2 years. They are not going to be successful with it. You know, when I referenced earlier about being at the expo, you know, we were there for 2 days. We saw maybe 10 people out of the thousands that were there. Maybe 10 were actually wearing a Reebok shirt, you know, with one of the fighter names on it, and they had a booth there. And these, you know, these were fanboys. They weren't just casual people at the mall. These were the hardcore of the hardcore. And there's no way can Reebok be happy with it, especially how Dana, you know, reacts on Twitter over stuff. They're a professional organization, so I don't see it lasting. Do you guys?
Not at all. And I'll just quickly say, you know, I don't want to knock the guys who wear, you know, everything Tap Out or everything Affliction or everything Dethrone. They support the companies that support the fighters, and I give them credit for that. But there's a fairly large amount of douchebags out there where all they have are these different fighter shirts, you know, and they've got thumb rings and spike frosted tip hair and you name it. Those guys aren't the guys. Even they draw the line with the Mighty Morphing Power Rangers outfit. They're not putting it on. They're not going to get a Matt Brown, you know, Mighty Morphing Power Rangers Reebok kit and sport that out at the bar where they say, yeah, I do UFC, bro. Sorry, it just doesn't sell their swag. It doesn't promote I'm a badass, right? It's like, oh, you look like a little kid. You look like an idiot. It's not going to take off, and they're definitely not going to re-sign because, people got to cut their losses. Reebok makes a ton of money with CrossFit. They've been very successful there. I think they were hoping that the CrossFit community and the MMA community would kind of be interchangeable. They'd get a little bit of crossover from that, and it's just not going to happen because people aren't going to support this. They know it's hurting the fighters, and they know that the fighters aren't getting an extra dime every time they have a T-shirt purchase with their name on it. They don't see any of that money. It's not like, oh, man, hey, Lawler, you did great. Sales are up 300%. Your jersey's selling out online. We're just going to cut you a check right now. No, that isn't happening. So there's nobody that's going to support this.
No, it just, the whole concept just amazes me. And it's 100% Dana running this, the Fertittas and Reebok. They're just looking to make another dime. And I just can't comprehend it. And maybe that's, as you said earlier, oh, this is their business. They can do whatever they want. That's very true. They can. But that's also a big part of the class action lawsuit that Kyle and I are a part of because they've labeled every one of the fighters as independent contractors. So how many independent contractors do you know that you tell them when they can work, where they work, who they're going to work with, and what uniform that they can wear, and their code of conduct in and outside of the workplace? That's an employee. Times are changing now. Even the cheerleaders just a couple of weeks ago won a big lawsuit labeling them as employees, that they need to be paid at least the minimum wage. They need all of these benefits. And people are saying, well, that's a dream job. They should be so thankful they get that. Just because you're living your dream doesn't mean you deserve to be taken advantage of by the bosses. But no one has been around for 100, 120 years, so they don't remember what it was like to work in a place with no fire extinguishers or fire exits or not have time and a half or health benefits. These were all things that people fought for, and in the case of fire exits, died for. So we could get them and then just remember, oh, this has just always been around. I don't know what the problem is. And most of these people that are against the fighters, it's just dumbfounding to me. Well, I love the UFC. You guys are just greedy. So you're telling me you love the corporate entity that is the UFC. You love Zuffa as opposed to the actual fighters who are putting on the fights. Because we could do that anywhere. We could take the main event from last weekend, get a warehouse and a cage. We're going to have the exact same fight. We don't need the corporate entity doing that. The corporate entity needs the fans, needs the fighters to do this thing. And they've been treating the fighters so badly, stepping over dollars to pick up this nickel. I honestly feel like they've completely shut this down, and they're taking the money, they're taking the nickel out of the fighter's hand, giving them back a penny, and then saying, you better say thank you for that penny. Because they've crushed the sponsorship market, so where these guys are starving. And a starving man will say thank you for a shit sandwich because he's starving. And at least he got a little bit of bread, and he doesn't know any better. Don't thank your abusers for creating this scenario that we now have to deal with. No, we need to band together and fight for these things.
So let's talk about that lawsuit real fast, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there. If the lawsuit is successful, will that force a fighters union to take place?
No, they're two completely separate entities. The lawsuit is a class action lawsuit against the monopolization of what Zuffa has done to the sport in itself. And natural occurrence out of that will be a fighters association or a union. But it's two completely separate things. It would be wonderful if we were able to just sign up a bunch of guys, start an association, and then have Zuffa recognize it. But that's not the way the world works. They're only, look at the Fertittas, the main owners of the UFC. They're one of two companies in the Vegas area, big casinos, that don't have unionized casinos. They're not going to just voluntarily say, cool, let's give these guys a bunch of rights. We either have to call them employees and treat them as such, or really treat them like independent contractors. No, unfortunately, in this day and age, you have to go to the courts to force people to do the right thing, because it's blatantly illegal, the things that they've done, the contracts that they've done, in blatant disregard to the Muhammad Ali Act, who then, after McCain originally said that UFC MMA was just human cockfighting, surprisingly enough, maybe he received a little bit of something to help convince him that it was okay, but not good enough to put on the Muhammad Ali Act. So what we're trying to do is just get the basic rights that every other worker, every other fighting or every other athletic organization in America has.
And are you allowed to say who else is on the lawsuit?
Go ahead, Nate.
I didn't hear the question.
Who else is on the lawsuit? We got Kung Lee, we've got Dennis Hallman, Brandon Vera, John Fitch.
I think Vanderlei Silva is Vanderlei Silva.
Dennis Unamiota. There's a few guys, you know, and it is growing, but by nature, the fact that it is class action and it is a federal case, if and when we win, it's going to support all the fighters, whether they've joined the class action lawsuit or not. So I think that's a key point to keep in mind, is that now everyone that's fighting in the UFC currently, and they don't have the voice because they're not a champion or belt holder to speak up for themselves, they don't have to worry about that. We're going to bat for them. We don't, you know, I'm retired. I don't have to worry about the UFC coming after me or anything like that. I'm not going to lose pay from these guys. So I can go ahead and move forward with this guy with the help of Nate and our great attorneys. And if we're successful, everyone that's in the UFC right now is going to benefit from this. It's going to change the way the sport is run for all the years moving forward. And if anybody else wants to get involved in the sport down the road, they're not going to have to deal with the same shit we dealt with.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I know fans, of course, are concerned about themselves, about the pay-per-view dollars, and I've had fans ask me, well, when you win this lawsuit, then that's just going to drive pay-per-view costs just through the roof. We won't be able to afford it. It's going to kill the entire industry. And I say, well, let's do a little bit of a breakdown on economics for you so you understand. How much did it cost to print an Affliction shirt? $5 maybe? So why didn't they sell it for $5 or $6? Make a little bit of a profit. Because people would pay $50 or $60 or $70 or $80. Do you honestly think that the UFC prices the pay-per-views at $60 because that's exactly what they need to break even? No, they're doing that to make massive profits. And they have sat down and decided this is the maximum amount that we can charge in today's economy and make as much money as possible. Why aren't they charging $45? Because you'll pay $60. Why aren't they charging $90? Because you won't pay $90, you'll pay $60. So when we win this lawsuit, heaven forbid that some of the 90% that goes to the owners actually goes to the workers, economics are still going to be the same. And as a matter of fact, you're going to start seeing even better fights because now you're going to have fighters that can afford better training camps, better health care that allow them to put it on the line. And people always feel better when there's job security as opposed to the speech that you get before every fight. If you lose, if you fail, we will probably cut you. That's not the way to get employee loyalty, to get the best performance out of guys.
Okay. One last thing before, because I want to move on to Bellator, because Bellator's got some kind of interesting stuff coming up. But one last thing, and let's try and keep it a little bit brief because we're getting a little bit long in the tooth here, is Dana's not popular. He's not popular amongst the fans, really. He's not popular amongst the fighters. Do you guys see a time where Fox has the rights to air the UFC, and Fox is huge? Can you see a scenario where Fox says, "Look, you guys, Dana's got to go. He cannot be the figurehead of this organization anymore," or Reebok saying that to the UFC? Do you guys see that as a likely scenario?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of people would like to see that. I don't know how much that changes, how much that changes the way the business operates or how they conduct business. It might change, the tweeting back to fans, talking shit to anybody that mentions Stitch Duran's name to him and things of that nature. But I don't know that necessarily is something that results in a positive favor for the fighters. So even if there was something where, from a PR standpoint, they said, listen, we just can't stay with you guys if you're going to have this guy going off on a tangent and ranting and raving every time he gets in front of a microphone. If they said that and Dana had to step down and run things behind the curtain, and they put up somebody else to kind of be the face of the company, that doesn't necessarily change the way things are operating, the way they conduct their business. So I think the bigger changes need to be made in the lawsuit. That's where we can really see change moving forward.
And I think it actually helps us with Dana staying as the president, because every one of us, Kyle, I'm sure you've got plenty of them, we all have these stories that happen behind the scenes with me getting called by Dana and told to shut the F up for things that I've said, or losing sponsors and all this. I hear stories from other fighters that just make my jaw drop when I hear how Kung Lee was treated when his wife is going to the hospital, and they're threatening him if he doesn't go to Macau and do this reality show, they'll sue him for millions of dollars for breach of contract. These are the things that we as fighters see all the time, and with Dana being so brash and rude to the fans, they get just the smallest taste of what we go through on a regular basis. So for us, I think it's great. As far as Reebok or Fox demanding that he go away, I think that's a very interesting conversation. I think the Fertittas are obviously mostly about money, so it'd be very interesting if they sat down and said, yeah, it's time to move on. You've gotten us this far. It's time to move on to a Scott Coker or somebody like that can take us to the next level. But I don't see it happening.
Well, you never know. It'll be interesting if it does. So September 19th, Bellator has, in my opinion, a rather massive event taking place. They're having a tournament-style fight with Phil Davis, Muhammad Law, Emmanuel Newton, and Linton Vassell. And I think the main event that night is Tito Ortiz and Liam McGeary. And Spike is advertising this as, well, not advertising. Spike is putting it out there that this is their biggest event they've ever done. But where the hell is the marketing? Have you guys seen marketing for this at all? And we're, a month and a half out?
No, I really haven't seen much in the way of marketing.
I haven't seen any marketing at all. I like the idea. I love the concept when it was announced that they were going to have the glory fights in a ring right next to the cage, and they were going to alternate back and forth between Glory's striking and kickboxing fights, which are some of the best guys in the world, K1 style fights, and then right from the ring on the next fight you could see in the cage some really high level MMA, and the first ever light heavyweight tournament to be done, all completed on the same night in California. That's just absolutely awesome. I love the lineup for that. I love the fact that we're going to see Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis come in, fresh out of the UFC, a terrifically talented guy out of San Diego, and we're going to see him fight other really good fighters in there. Emmanuel Newton has been the better man twice against Muhammad Lawal, so seeing where they fight each other in the tournament is going to be a big and interesting thing. People want to know what a top 5 guy, because Phil was in the top 5 light heavyweight. How's he going to stack up against these guys? He's obviously the favorite going into there, but you've got a really good wrestler with great hands in Muhammad Lawal training at American Top Team. He's kind of underperformed as of late, but a lot of is expected of him. So there's a lot of things that I want to see in that, and I haven't heard a word about it since the announcement. So it's like, yeah, and this is in San Jose. It's in my backyard. They're going to have it right here at the Shark Tank. This is where Strikeforce originated, and Bellator's coming here for the first time. It's going to be supposedly their biggest thing ever, and just like you said, I haven't heard anything about it since the announcement, and I've even spoken to King Mo. I've spoken to Phil Davis about it, and everything's moving according to plan. It's not like they haven't, they're waiting on some type of agreement to be made with the HP Pavilion or the SAP Center or whoever's hosting the event. No, all this stuff's done. It's going to happen. They're just not putting the money into it. So that's it's a little confusing, from an MMA standpoint, because as a former UFC fighter, I really want to see other organizations succeed. I want to see diversity. I want to see competition, because it's better for the fighters and it's better for the fans. So if Bellator does really well and they can move up to Pride status, that's just going to be good for the sport. And we're going to see better pay across the board for guys, regardless of what happens in the lawsuit, because of the fact that, Scott Coker always paid well to begin with in Strikeforce. He was paying out 80% of the fighters. But now, if his company continues to do well, that's a draw. That's a way to get guys to come over from the UFC and to be a part of their company, where they're not going to have these ridiculous sponsorship laws and things like that. Guys that have been sponsoring MMA before can continue to sponsor the sport there. They're on Spike TV. They got a lot going on for them, but they need to hit the ground running, and they don't. It seems like they're dropping the ball here.
Well, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and just hope that because it's a ways out, they're seeing the short attention span with most Americans, that they're going to wait a little bit longer and push it towards the end, because honestly, I think it's really exciting. Doing a four-man tournament in one night, and that's a dream come true. In retrospect, it's something I would have loved to have done. If somebody sat that contract in front of me right now, I might be a little hesitant. But just the thought of it alone, I think, is incredibly exciting. And I really feel like Bellator and Spike, they get it. The stars are the fighters. Nobody is buying a pay-per-view because Dana says this is the best fight ever. No one's going to tune in because Scott Coker is there front and center saying, look at me, look at how awesome I am. The second highest rated free MMA fight of all time on free TV, Tito Ortiz versus Stephan Bonnar. Two guys way past their prime, not fighting for a title, but everybody knew them. They knew who they were. They knew why they were fighting. They hyped up the fight. That got ratings. It wasn't because Scott Coker was right there saying, these guys are putting on the best fight ever. This is going to be the greatest fight ever, blah, 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 with two random guys, or even if it was them. No, Spike understands it. Let the fighters be the star. That's the way it used to be in the UFC before they decided, no, Dana's going to be the star of the UFC. All the fighters are expendable. And you see that in the UFC magazine, Dana White on the cover all the time. No, let the fighters do what they do best. And no other fighting organization do you have Roger Goodell as the face of the NFL. No, it's the teams. It's the players. I think Spike and Bellator really get that, and it's refreshing to see more of that focus put back on the fighters again.
I can't tell you how proud I am of you for knowing who Roger Goodell is in relation to the NFL.
That's it. That's all I know. Just because of all the...
All right, so Tito Ortiz and Liam McGeary. Liam, in my opinion, is he's a beast. He is an absolute beast. He has that calm demeanor outside the ring where he just seems to, you could hand him a pencil and he's going to think like, oh, hey, thanks, man. But as soon as he's walking towards that cage, he looks like the last person you would ever want to fight. Does Tito have a chance? Because you guys took a long pause.
No, I didn't know there was a question mark at the end of that statement.
You're supposed to talk.
I'm going to say right now, I think that a healthy Tito can win the fight, and I think that we saw it against Bonnar. Look, from an MMA standpoint, from a fan standpoint, a lot of people's gripes when they watch Bellator, especially with the Ken Shamrock, Kimbo Slice debacle, is why are these guys fighting? Right? Why is this guy fighting? He's not going to be the best in the world anymore. A lot of people say that. Certainly when you see Ken Shamrock, a guy in his 50s, it's like, dude, just hang it up. Bellator, what are you doing making these guys the main event? I consider that apples and oranges because when I see a healthy Tito, I see a guy who's still got something to prove. I see a guy who's still got it. And, you could say what you want. You can have your opinion on Tito Ortiz as a person. You could be a huge fan. You can hate him. It doesn't matter. He's polarizing. People want to see him fight, whether you want to see him get his ass kicked or whether you want to see him win. He's polarizing, and as they say in pro wrestling, he's over. He's over with the fans. They love him or hate him, and that's what you want to see. So sticking this guy in the main event against a much younger stud, I think it's a great move, and I really do feel that everyone questioning whether this guy should be there or not, they won't be questioning when they see him get on top of McGeary and start pounding him because he still has some of the best ground and pound in the game. When he's healthy, he's one of the strongest guys at 205. He's a terrific wrestler, and he's got a great gas tank. So I think Tito's going to come out and prove a lot of people wrong in this fight.
Yeah, I really hope that he's healthy coming into this fight, just because I don't want to hear how unhealthy he is in the post-fight interview, because that's how it is every time. And I fought today. I've got my skull is cracked. I've got 3 broken legs. I have Ebola.
He needs your spinal fusion with all the spinal injuries. He needs your sponsor on his trunks to hook him up.
I got him that. He contacted me.
No shit.
What's it been, 10 or 11 years ago, because he had the exact same thing, degenerative disc disease in his lumbar spine. He goes, Nate, I went to a doctor. These guys want to cut my abdominals open, move all my organs, get to the back. And I said, Tito, maybe that's your solution. I don't know, but this is the surgery that I had done, the XLIF. And why don't you look into it and see if it'll work for you? So I lined it up for him to go see NuVasive, the company that pioneered the procedure, and that's what he ended up getting. And a year later, he fought a return fight against, I think, Forrest Griffin. And then after that, he had another spinal fusion for his neck. So, man, I'm always looking out, buddy.
So, but what I'm getting from this is that was 10 years ago. So that excuse should be obsolete then.
Yeah, but what does he have? I think last time it was my skull is literally cracked. I've got a broken arm. He always has these things. And every time he says that, I'm like, Tito, you come with the excuses either after a win, but preferably not after you win the next fight. Say, you know, thank you. Like when I fought Jason McDonald. Damian Maia beat my ass, no question about it. I also had the flu, 102-degree fever, was throwing up all night. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't want to make excuses. I waited till after I beat Jason McDonald. That was the first time in the media I ever mentioned it. They said, man, you beat Jason McDonald when you were so dominated by the other guy with the exact same game. What happened? Well, not taking anything away from Damian Maia because the guy was awesome. He beat my ass healthy, but I was really sick that day. Oh, my God, you were sick? We're just hearing about it now?
You're like, you know what? Funny that you bring it up, because 3 years ago, I was on my deathbed when I stepped in the cage against Damian Maia. So thanks for bringing it up. Finally, I can get it off my chest.
My favorite thing about that fight is, you know, what was it, 2 or 3 days later, his training partner of Nate and mine, Eddie Dolan, says, is it okay if we talk about how you kissed the guy on television?
Well, okay, so the breakdown, Damian Maia, first thing he says to me, he gives me a hug and he says, I'm sorry, which I just think Damian Maia is incredible. A great human being, great fighter. And then he does, the Brazilian gives me a kiss on the cheek. So I go to kiss him on the cheek as our faces come together, and I end up kissing him square on the lips with the cameras on us. And all I could think right at that moment was, it's just like when I would kiss my father. He's got the scraggly beard.
Aww. That just touched me deep inside. And I got a quarter chub out of it, too.
You're welcome.
So, Kyle, so you're retired now. You know, 4 losses in a row. The last one, some of the losses were you know, pretty lopsided. Some of them were really close, where if you would have had that extra round, like with Jimmy Manawa, you clearly would have won that fight. But you're done with it now, and you've really started a more spiritual path, as we can see from the background. And I know you on a personal level, so I know a lot about stuff that you've been doing, but what does the future hold for you? What is your intent going forward? You have a brand new son, Bear Soul Kingsbury, awesome, soon-to-be wife. So what is your plan?
Well, you know, I don't know exactly what the future holds. Right now, I'm just continuing to do what I love. I only have to. I'm fortunate enough that my mom's helping me out, and I have an awesome wife who's okay with living in mom's garage. So, real quick, I'll give you the tour of what a UFC fighter can aspire to. Here's my scooter. We'll do the tour of cribs real quick.
MMA cribs.
See what the world looks like. Here's our kitchen. There's Bear's crib. There's our crib. Here's our closet. Oh, and here we're back to the start. Okay. So you got a good look at my entire home here. The good news is, you know, it's a detached garage, so I'm not always stuck dealing with mom. We have our own restroom. She lets us use the house to shower when we need to. It cuts the cost of living down significantly, as she only charges us $500 a month for rent, utilities, cable bill, internet, all that fun stuff. And that allows me to just work this bouncing and bartending deal twice a week. So really, I work on the weekends. I have the entire week during the week to do what I love, which is training every day. I'm in the gi doing jiu-jitsu. I meditate. I lift weights. I just got a nice weight set in here from Rogue. Been training a lot like I used to when I was playing football. You know, a lot of people look back, and myself included. It's been a year since my last fight. Before that, it was in 2012 when I fought Manawa, so there was a 2-year layoff there due to some injuries and really gathering myself. In that span between Manawa and Cummins is when I had my first experience with ayahuasca. I've spoken a bit about it before, and I don't want to get too far into it, as I could take a whole podcast talking about my experiences there. But really, for those that don't know what it is, it's considered the apex of teacher plants. In that is a tea from the Amazon, 100% organic. It's 2 plants and water mixed together, boiled for about a day, and it is by far one of the most psychedelic and transformative experiences that you can have, and I've certainly, has been the case for me. I've done it 12 times, all in places where it's legal. Thank you. I had a wonderful trip to Peru and Colombia. They call it Yahe in Colombia, and I had a beautiful ceremony there. But, long story short, that really started changing my mind about things in terms of what's important in life, what's important to me, what am I getting from this? Everyone starts fighting for different reasons. I don't want to say that all fighters are damaged goods, but on some level, you have a burning desire to destroy someone as a fighter. If you don't, you get weeded out pretty quickly. If you're that guy in the gym who sees someone on the TV and says, oh, I want to be a badass, I want to go punch someone in the mouth and have all the girls and make all the money, and you get tuned up in sparring, you're done. You won't even make it into a fight because you don't have it in you. So every guy that makes it to the level of the UFC, they have on some level a burning desire to hurt someone. And over time, that just vanished away. It wasn't from meditation. It wasn't from anyone ceremony with ayahuasca. It wasn't from yoga. But, I mean, hell, it might have been a combination of everything. And certainly over time, it just came to a point where it wasn't important to me anymore. And that's not to say, oh, this is the reason I lost. I lost. I lost to I can tell you all 4 of my last losses. Bonner was 1,000 times better than me on the ground. He was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I was a blue belt at the time. In that loss, that fueled me to become a better guy on the ground, and I love jiu-jitsu now. So I thank Bonner for that loss because it's given me something that I can do the rest of my life, and I appreciate the gentle art. In the following fight, I went against Glover Teixeira. Worst loss of my career. I got my ass kicked so bad, I didn't know where the locker room was. It's the only fight where I literally was lost as I left the cage. And I couldn't, the pride inside me and the ego wasn't allowing me to say, hey, fuck, I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get back. I don't know what's going on. So rather than trying to get, I didn't want a medical suspension, that kind of thing. I just wandered around the damn arena after the Glover fight. So I was just outmatched in that fight. And then when I went against Manawa, there was a way to beat Jimmy. But Jimmy's way to beat me was the way to win. He was successful. I don't blame the doctors for stopping that fight. I'm happy they did. In that fight, if they're going to ask you, can you continue, you're always going to say yes. There's no doubt about that. And I certainly would have wanted to fight that 3rd round. I felt like I could have won going into the 3rd round, but the fact that I had an orbital fracture here and a busted eyebrow here, I mean, there's no telling what kind of permanent damage I could have had from that fight had we continued, and I got just cracked one more time. So I'm grateful that that fight ended the way that it did. And really after that fight, that's when I had some soul searching to do. I was on a 3-fight losing streak. I wasn't sure if I was going to fight again. I love training still, so I was training quite a bit, and I tore my right labrum. And in that time off, I could only meditate. I couldn't even walk. I couldn't run. I couldn't have sex. If you've ever had a labrum surgery, any jostling of your shoulder, I mean, it'll just put you on your knee. So literally, I'm thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna get to train legs. I'm gonna get to run. I'm gonna work on my cardio. All that was out. And for 6 months, I had to focus on internal stuff. So I would sit quietly. I got into binaural beats meditation as a form of audio stuff. It's a lot of people throw around the term biohacks. It's basically sound wave stuff that you use for the brain to get you into an alpha wave or a theta wave state. It's very relaxing. At the very least, it's very relaxing, but it does allow you to kind of cut the shit out of your life and hone in on what's important and really just feel good. You know, I mean, everybody says, well, if it's unfamiliar to you, you question why somebody would do that. Like, why would somebody sit in a 105-degree room stretching with a bunch of people that smell different than you do, or a couple of hot chicks are in there? But what's the point in hot yoga? Well, if you do it and you get something from it, then you see it, you feel it. And certainly with meditation, that's been the case for me. For a long time, I meditated and got nothing out of it. And then with this surgery, I was really forced to be quiet, and I was able to find this peaceful place. And that, in conjunction with ayahuasca ceremonies, where I would have profound visions, just to touch a hair on that. People think when you have a psychedelic that you're hallucinating, and that the hallucination is just this fake image you're going to see that has nothing to do with reality, and you're just watching a movie screen full of bullshit. And hopefully that bullshit is entertaining. So like, Fear and Loving Las Vegas, he sees the bats, and he's like, oh, bats everywhere, bats, and they're like, oh, I don't think that's for me. I don't want to have that experience. But I think in the case of ayahuasca, no matter what you see, whether it's a dragon, a bat, an alien, your dead mother, no matter what you see, you're seeing it for a reason that's personal to you. And for me, that couldn't be more true. In any experience that I've had, whether I saw an animal like a bear, whether I saw a relative, or no matter who I was speaking to, even speaking to a tree, as fruity as that may sound, all that information was something that I needed at the time, and it was very important for me, and it was something that helped me to grow as a person and to just get more out of life. Like people say, even my sister, when I was telling her about these experiences, she was like, I'm telling her how healing it is, and she's like, do you plan on continuing to do it? And I was like, yeah, it's not something you do all the time, but 2 or 3 times a year I'd like to continue to do it the rest of my life if I can. And she said, man, that would suck to have to heal that much. And it cracked me up, like you are one broken piece of shit if you need to keep doing this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, like, to see things from a new angle, to get a new perspective on past events, not even just traumas, just everyday shit in life where you're thinking about some stressor that you have. And a favorite quote of mine, one of my favorite quotes from A Course in Miracles is, your problems aren't problems. You only think they are. And when you hear that, you're like, yeah, it sounds cool. But when you think about it, every single thing, other than a guy getting chased by a tiger in Bangladesh or wherever, other than that instance where your life's on the line or a rhino's chasing you, you really don't have to worry about a damn thing. We play up things so much in our minds, and being able to grasp and digest these concepts and have a better and a deeper understanding of what's really important in life has been all the difference in the world for my quality of life. And me personally, I just enjoy every day more. I really do. And even though we live in a detached garage here, I live in beautiful California. We're 40 minutes from the ocean. I have an amazing, awesome wife. I got my first son. He's incredible. Everyone's healthy. And, I get to train jiu-jitsu every day. I get to go outside in the sun with my shirt off and enjoy the weather. I get to lift weights. I get to have these transformative experiences in a perfectly legal environment. And, I just couldn't ask for much more. I really couldn't, because as much as I love MMA and I love fighting, and it gave me the growth that I needed, it allowed me to change and become a better person. I got everything I needed from fighting. And I don't need much more. I don't have anything else to prove. I don't need to be the best at anything. I certainly wasn't the best, in MMA at any point in time, but I don't need to be the best. There was a point in time where I needed to prove that I was the best. I wanted to show everyone, this is how good I am. Look at me. I'm great. And I don't give a fuck. There are more important things to me, like peace of mind and enjoying life and getting a little bit out of every single day. Even when I have work, I'm getting more out of each day, and that's what ayahuasca's given me. That's what meditation's given me, and I couldn't ask for much more.
You're a huge advocate for clean living, organic, farm raised chickens, cow, as little processed foods as possible. In your ideal world, what is the number one thing that you want people to be able to walk away knowing about that type of a life?
Well, I think that's a loaded question. So let me start with this. Nothing happens overnight. When I first got into nutrition, I was 15 years old. My dad got me a subscription to the Muscle Mags. I think there's a lot of kids growing up in the 80s that had that subscription to the Muscle Mags, Muscle Media 2000, Bill Phillips, all that crap. It's easy to get sucked into I want this body or I want that body, especially for women. But in fighting, in football, I was trying to get as big as possible. In fighting, I was trying to get lean. And then, the beautiful part about fighting is 8 weeks down the road, I know someone's going to hit me in the face. So knowing someone's going to hit me in the face, how do I spend this next 8 weeks preparing myself for that to minimize damage and give myself the best opportunity to win? Well, that right there, just that mindset eliminated me from playing video games. And I love video games. I grew up playing video games. I'm making a video game right now with 2K Games. When you look at the pie chart of how you spend your time each day, so many people want to just zone out. They want to invest in entertaining themselves. They play Clash of Clans on their phone. They're little cock boys, I call them. All the time you spend doing that is great. That's fine. You earned it, right? You have a job you don't like. Your mom's stressing you out. Whatever it is, sometimes you just need to unload. That's totally fine. But also, give a little sliver of each day to yourself. Give a little sliver of each day to learning something new. Make that sliver something that could be a hobby that you enjoy. Like maybe you're a handyman and you want to know how to do your own whatever project at the house. Whatever it is, devote a sliver of each day to learning something new and getting better at that. If health or anything along the lines of positive mood, getting a body you want, feeling better, having mobility and full range of motion because your knee doesn't work or you had a back injury or you got whiplash from the car accident in 2005, if any of those things are a factor, then health should be at the top of your list. And Paul Chek has one of my favorite quotes of all time: sooner or later, your health will be your number one concern. Sooner or later, your health will be your number one concern. So you can make that now a priority, or you can make that a priority when your doctor tells you that they got to cut your balls off because you've got prostate cancer, or you can make that a priority when you're on your deathbed and you got to come to grips with dying in front of your family. At some point, it'll be your number one concern. So my focus is, how do we go away from the make-believe, man-made world we're living in and try to understand what it was like before refrigeration, before supermarkets, before processed food, before electronics, before all the bullshit that we're inundated with as Westerners? Can we at least retreat to having some form of nature in our lives every day? Can we at least get real whole food in our body again? And this isn't to say, I eat a ketogenic, high-fat, low-carb diet. I'm not knocking anyone who has fruit. I'm not even knocking people who have grains. But there's better choices to be made along those lines. And if your idea of figuring out health is reading the latest blog from some hot chick on Instagram, you're going about it the wrong way. You got to make it your passion. You got to read books. Don't read the latest article online. Get a damn book where somebody invested time, energy, focus, and all the latest research. One of my favorite guys, Dr. Perlmutter, he wrote Grain Brain. He just came out with a book called Brain Maker. It's all in the gut microbiome, how it affects your thoughts. 80% of our serotonin is made in our stomach. It's not, the neurotransmitter that makes us feel happy is made in our guts. So if we keep putting crap in our body, it's easy to understand why we might be a little down on ourselves, why we might be a little bit depressed. And it's not just because you don't look the way that you want to. It's literally because you are killing off the good bacteria that make you happy. So having a concept of these things, that everything you put in your body has an impact on how you feel. Everything that you put in your body has an impact on the way you move, the way you perform, and the way you look. When you consider all these things, at least divide a little bit of that pie chart to investing back into yourself, reading and learning a bit about health. And then in doing that, it's easy, because when it's your passion, you can decide what's best for you. You can try different diets, you can try different things, and as long as it's coming from that original, healthy, whole, natural source, then you're on the right track, because everyone is an individual, and it is about fine-tuning and finding what's right for you, but it all starts with having a healthy longing and thirst for that knowledge. You can't just expect somebody to come and hand you a pill or hand you a piece of paper and says, this is the how-to, this is the Cliff Notes, just read it real quick and you'll be fine. No, make this your passion and you'll get a lot more out of it.
Awesome. Is there something that you avoid at all costs now as far as food intake goes?
Well, I am gluten intolerant. I don't have celiac disease. There's a huge difference there. I think a lot more people are gluten intolerant than having celiacs. In 2013 was the first time the Celiac Society even acknowledged the fact that you could have a gluten intolerance without having celiacs. That said, it's not the end of the world if I eat gluten. On paper, it's just a lot like a lactose intolerance. I get a stuffy nose. Maybe I'm a little gassy, that kind of thing. But what that does to my nobody likes Natasha does not like the gassiness from the gluten. But a big thing once you get into eating good food and making your own meals, it's pretty easy to find substitutions. Biting into a real pizza is never going to be the same as eating my cauliflower crust cheesy pizza at home. But when I eat the cauliflower crust cheesy pizza at home, I don't feel like shit the next day. I don't have gas. I don't hurt. I don't blow up like a puffer fish with edema. My feet don't swell. I don't perform worse the next day in the gym. I perform better. I feel good. And all those things, it's not just hey, I'm going to the mindset of I've done so good on my diet. I've lost 10 pounds. Now I'm going to throw it all away and eat like a fat loser. Now I'm going to stuff my face with Ben & Jerry's. That's all wrong. Treat yourself with something that's good. Treat yourself with a day at the beach. Treat yourself with a massage. Find a way to reward yourself other than, ruining all the gains that you've just made. So I think that's a big thing is, if you're going to, and the people that I train now, I tell them, if you're going to go off the wagon and you're going to have a cheat meal, make it at home. Make it at home. Go to Whole Foods or Sprouts. Go to your farmer's market. Buy all the ingredients there, and then make it homemade, because it's going to be 100 times better for you if you make the cheat meal at home than if you go out to the store and buy it.
How did you discover that you're gluten intolerant?
There's many ways. They've got blood tests now that are pretty effective. I did an elimination diet. So I had a strength coach when I got right out of college, and he even told me, he had a thick New York accent for Brooklyn. He was like, "Oh, man, you fought a lot." And I was like, "You're a guy, right? Like, who says that to another man? You fart a lot." And he started laughing, and he's like, "I fart like every other dude. Get off me." And he's like, "No, seriously, I think you have an intolerance." So we eliminated dairy, we eliminated all bread and grain, and 3 weeks later, I had a ton of dairy in one day, little phlegmy, nothing major, no problems. 3 days later, I had a bunch of pasta, some bread, and I couldn't breathe out of my nose for 24 hours. And I was as bloated as could be. I was farting up a storm, and right then, there was all the textbook signs of that gluten intolerance. And it took me a good 5 years to finally say, I don't need this anymore. So for everyone that thinks, they get down on themselves for taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, it's a long process to get to the point where now I know there's no reason for me to have that. I can have something else and be completely satisfied with it. I don't need to have bread. I don't need to have pizza. I can make my own pizza, those kind of things. But that decision's up to me. And ultimately it did take a long time to come to that conclusion. But basically, I'm at a point now where I won't put anything in my body that I find to be detrimental. I'll only put things in my body that I really find to be beneficial, in every way. And that goes from food to psychedelics to anything. If I want to alter my consciousness, I'm not going to get hammered drunk like I did in college. I'm going to pick something that can open my mind and expand my awareness. And in the end, there's no hangover. There is no feeling like crap the next day. There is no depression that night wondering why I made the decisions that I made, because all the decisions I made were good. And the life review that I get from psychedelics really does improve my life. It really does make me think of things in a different way, and it changes me positively. So when I make my choice to alter my consciousness, it's not with alcohol, it's with cannabis or psychedelics, and I feel that's been a massive improvement in my life as well.
Have you read any of those articles recently about the positive impact that hallucinogens are having on our soldiers with PTSD?
Yes, actually, Rick Doblin is the founder of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. MAPS.org is actually right here in our backyard in Santa Cruz, California. I went and saw Rick Doblin speak with another guy, Professor James Fadiman, and he wrote Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. Fantastic book if you're interested in that kind of thing. And these guys are speaking about what's going on now in the world of psychedelics. Really, they've been at the forefront of gathering funding. One of the Rockefellers has been a huge advocate for this as well in funding research. I mean, it's hard because everything sounds so woo-woo when I talk about it. Obviously, you see the banners I'm flagging behind me. For people that haven't had an experience like this, it's easy to say, then this guy's off his fucking rocker, you know. And if I had heard myself 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh, I turned into this douche. Like I would never expect this at all, right? That said, if we look at cannabis, just cannabis, anybody who's smoked weed before, they know it's not the Reefer Madness video. They know you don't lose your fucking mind and then you start, whoa, I'm crazy. Oh my God, let's jump off a building. So propaganda that we've been fed our whole lives and generations prior about cannabis is complete crap. And we know that the government's done this to us. We know that cannabis now, with the legalization in certain states, as well as with the medicalization in other states, we're starting to see research come forward that shows the dramatic impact on beneficial things that we can get from these plant, vegetation extracts that we're getting out of cannabis, and it's showing across the board, hey, there's benefit here. So I think when you look at mushrooms and ayahuasca and other psychedelics that are plant-based, more and more this research is going to start coming to the forefront. And guys like Rick Doblin and Maps.org, they're doing a great service to the world because they're going outside the U.S. where they can, to places like Switzerland and other places, Portugal, where they're allowed to conduct research, and they're performing double-blind studies with some of the best scientists in the world, and they're finding out that, hey, psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, had an 80% success rate in people with terminal illness. So you're going to die. There's no way around it. They give them mushrooms, and 80% of those people were now okay with dying. So what did that do for them? Did it save their lives? No. But what it did was it improved their quality of life for the last days that they had. They didn't fear death anymore. They got more out of their last days. So rather than dwelling on the fact that they were dying, rather than pushing their family away and not being fun to be around, they got the most out of what they could before they died. And that right there, 80% success rate, that's phenomenal. You look at any other science, you look at pharmaceuticals in general, you're not going to find those kind of numbers in many other places. So things like that we'll begin to find out more and more, certainly with PTSD and the fact that 23 soldiers a day are killing themselves. Everyone here on this podcast has been on tours for the troops. Obviously, Kurt, you're a former Marine. It's a big, big issue. And the fact that there's something out there that's natural and organic can change your perspective and allow you to heal and grow and maybe see something that happened to you in a different way to where you can digest it and process it and feel okay with it and go on with your life and not be depressed anymore. These things need to be explored at the very least. So to say that they're a Schedule 1 and they have no medicinal benefit, that needs to be changed. It needs to be something where, hey, you don't have to decriminalize all drugs and have a free-for-all. It's not Amsterdam. But at least make these things medically available, at least do research on them, find out exactly what they do and what dosages, what's the best way of administering them. All these things, I think, in the next 20 to 30 years will head that direction. And I think that's really the beauty of what Rick Doblin and Maps.org is doing right now.
And at a very minimum, decriminalize the use of this stuff, because they're not getting, even if you view it as a problem, nobody's getting help in prison. So sending people...
And fundamentally, prohibition just doesn't work. So, I mean, Graham Hancock is one of my favorite guys on earth. He said, there's already laws in place for killing people. There's already laws in place for driving under the influence. There's already laws in place for stealing and robbing people. So enforce those laws. And if somebody gets drugged up on name your drug, and they perform a crime, then hold them accountable. Don't allow them to have this, oh, it was temporary insanity. No, you chose to take that, and now you've got to pay the consequences for your actions.
Well, that's a good point, because I've never really understood that myself. It's like Tom Cruise's pre-crime. Well, doing drugs leads you to robbing people, et cetera, et cetera. Can you imagine hanging out at a bar saying, okay, well, you're drinking now, and everyone knows drinking leads to drunk driving, abusing your spouse, abusing your kids, unwanted pregnancies, so we're just going to go ahead and arrest all of you in case you do those things. And yet when it comes to drugs, and I think every single one of us has a horrific negative story about drug use, which can also apply right to alcoholism, cigarette smoking, all of these things. And yet we have this double standard where these mushrooms or this plant, to take you out of the bad element that you'd be around using drugs and around that crime world and losing your jobs, we're going to lock you up in a horrible element where you lose your job and you lose your family. It just makes no sense. But then alcohol was cool. And 10,000 people died during prohibition of alcohol, and finally they said enough is enough. We need to legalize this. How many millions of years have to be lost in the prison system? How many trillions of dollars have to be lost before we readdress these things?
I think more and more people are awareness is spreading thanks to the internet. You know, it is the truth, and whether people are finding a source for psychedelics or not doesn't really matter. Enough people are becoming aware of the fact that, hey, we've been sold a bill of goods that just isn't true, and prohibition doesn't work whether you hope people don't do these things or not. That hasn't stopped anyone from making meth in their house. You know, they got TV shows about it. It's happening. Meth is not one of these drugs that's a transformative experience, but it still exists in the world today. I just had a family member die of a drug overdose with OxyContin, and that is one of the biggest killers in America, prescription medication. So when we begin to look at things and say, why are these drugs illegal, it has nothing to do with safety. It has everything to do with money, you know. And I think thanks to states like Colorado, where we have legalization of marijuana and the taxation of it, you see how much money can be made. You see that it can be invested back into our education system, that can also be invested into research of cannabis and what it does for us medically. Denver, or Colorado rather, just invested, I think, $10 million into studying cannabis from their taxes alone. So just looking at things like that, we can see a shift in the way we're doing things, and enough people are getting together and getting the right mind. I know 5 senators, I think Rand Paul was one of them, they just put together a bill that stated Congress and the federal government is not allowed any longer to enter into a state where marijuana and cannabis is medically available and have any jurisdiction whatsoever. So if you've ever seen the weed documentaries, Weed 1, 2, and 3 on CNN with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, that's a pretty big issue. People are growing plants legally in their state, and the DEA shows up, they burn the whole crop down, and they throw the people in jail and take all the cash to fund the DEA right from their drawers, right? So that's no longer allowed now. The CIA, the FBI, they can't just show up into your state and say, oh, you know, you're growing 6 plants because you think it's legal here, huh? Well, now you're going to jail. All that's done with. So I think that we're starting to see a shift into the mindset, and thankfully, you know, people that are, you know, the powers that be are starting to get the message too, and they're starting to jump on board with this, at least on some level.
There's an interesting lawsuit that's coming up that's going to go straight to the Supreme Court. So Colorado, Washington, Oregon, you know, have the legal use. I think Kansas and Nebraska right now are suing Colorado because Colorado has the anyone can use it, not for medicinal, but for recreational use. And because the state suing a state, it can't go anywhere but the Supreme Court. So the 2 states are suing Colorado. It'll go straight to the Supreme Court, trying to get Colorado to no longer allow it, because people are coming over here buying it. I live in Colorado, buying it and then taking it back to Nebraska and Kansas. And so Nebraska and Kansas see it as a problem. And so instead of looking how to make it better for their state, they're suing Colorado. It's ridiculous. And people don't, you know, you guys know, but I don't use cannabis, but I think it's absolutely everybody's right to be able to say, like, this is what I want. This is better for me, and I know my body better than anyone else, and I should be able to say what helps me. And so having another state come in there and say, like, no, you can't do that, it's pretty ridiculous. Don't live in the state. So.
Well, I personally, I can't sleep at night. I've had 8 surgeries. I've been on massive amounts of narcotics to help me get through those surgeries and recover. I've had innumerable concussions, just damaged. My father as well was very insomniac, so I just couldn't sleep. So the solution from my doctors was Ambien, amitriptyline. Amitriptyline is ridiculously, it just knocks you out. Ambien puts people into a zone. I would have hours of conversations that I wouldn't remember the next day. And that was the solution, to be on these drugs for the rest of my life so I could sleep. Well, then it was legalized here in Oregon, and I went down, I got my medical marijuana card, and started partaking of just edibles so I could sleep at night. And the first night that I did that, I recall taking a bite of a brownie, laying down. 8 hours later, I woke up, and I was so refreshed, it was ridiculous. I'd never experienced sleep like this since I was a little kid. And to have that available for me, and I'm the guy that has seen, my brother is a ridiculous alcoholic pothead, can't hold down a job, blah, blah, blah. So I've seen the negative side, and I didn't want to go down that pathway. But just like with alcohol, I've got another former friend who's now a homeless guy, raging alcoholic, but I still drink because I'm not that guy. I'm going to make my decisions with my alcohol, how I'm going to maintain my life, my lifestyle. It's the same thing with marijuana. You can demonize something and apply a regulation across the board that really doesn't belong that way. If drugs were really as addictive as they say, then half of the country would be in rehab or in prison because of it's been proven. And that's kind of a joke that I like to make. Don't do drugs unless, of course, you want to be president of the United States or an action star. Obama, Clinton, GW, all admitted to using drugs. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, they did a bust on an anti-aging clinic so they could find all the athletes that were illegally using human growth hormones and things like that. They found 50 Cent, Mary J. Blige, all these other people who are successful people that want to look good. If you watch the documentary, I think it's Bigger, Faster, Stronger, talks about steroids in itself. It's responsible for like 3 deaths a year, and yet it's ridiculously controlled substance. When in its purest form, it was made to heal people. You hit 25, your testosterone production goes down 1.5% to 2% every single year. So by the time you're in your 40s and 50s, you're less than half the man you used to be, literally.
By the time you're Kurt's age, your balls just go back inside.
Insert Jenner joke here. Caitlyn Jenner.
Oh, insert too.
Insert the insert.
Hey, unfortunately, guys, we got to wind down. Kyle, as always, man, it's just great to talk to you. Your insight on just life in general and the way you view stuff is, I think, very undervalued. You're super intelligent, fun guy, and thank you very much for joining us on our inaugural podcast. Is there social media that people can contact you at? Stay with you, follow you?
Yes, I'm officially done with Facebook, so you won't find me there. But Twitter at Kingsboo, Instagram at Kingsboo. I respond to anyone who writes me. So if you write me something and want a response, I'll answer questions or give you a holler back. And that's about it. Thank you guys very much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have me back in the future.
Oh,
We have to. We've got a whole list of other things that we haven't even touched upon yet.
Oh yes.
Yeah, we wanted, because Kyle is he's against vaccines, and so we wanted to be able to talk to Kyle about that. His insight. Nate is pro-vaccine, and so it would have been a very interesting conversation.
Let me just leave it at this. Just like Jim Carrey said, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm for vaccine changes. I'm anti-mercury. I'm anti-thimerosal. I'm anti-aluminum, and I'm anti-formaldehyde and all the other toxins that they put in these vaccines and say they're not detrimental. Just like glyphosate in Roundup from the corporate giant Monsanto, that's not bad for us either, right? I disagree.
I'm curious where did Jim Carrey get his doctorate from again? I'm curious.
So next weekend it looks like we'll have Kyle back. So Kingsboo at Twitter, or Twitter at Kingsboo, and Instagram at Kingsboo.
Let me say one thing to Kyle. We were we were going back and forth on Facebook when he still had a Facebook page, and we were talking. He posted that he's not in vaccinating his kids, and I made some comments, and I apologized to him later via text message. I just want to be very clear. When I was stating my opinion, I'm sure I came off very curt and not curt, but very curt myself and very dry. And I thought about that later, and I was like, wow, I probably came off like an asshole on his own page when I was just trying to make my own point. So I want to publicly apologize to Kingsbury if I said anything that was deemed inappropriate or
Nate,
rude on your own page.
Nate, I love you, buddy, and that's why I text you. I wanted you to watch that documentary, which I know you haven't watched yet.
I did.
You did?
I watched it. I watched as much of it as I could.
Okay. So
I did a lot of fast forwarding. I'll be honest with you.
But let me ask you. You mentioned where did Jim Carrey get his doctorate from? All the medical doctors, and I think there's over 20 that are featured in that film, which they released for free. What do you wonder if they're suspect? Like, do you think of them as the same level as Jim Carrey? Or do you say, okay, there might be an asterisk next to that medical doctor, or maybe this guy who used to work at the CDC and is now talking about autism rates actually being found with thimerosal, maybe that guy's full of shit too.
Let me quote the actual documentary we're referring to, where they said scientists are pushing these vaccinations on us just like they are with that global warming.
All right, you guys, we got to stop.
Yes, we can find 20 scientists that are against vaccinations, and then there's the other 99% that are for them. Global warming, 3% of the scientists are against global warming. The other 97% are for them. So, and I think that the documentary had a lot of really good points, and I really like what you just said there about changing things for the better, because quite often that's what I hear is, we hate this, we hate this, we hate this, what's your solution? We don't have one, I just hate this. And so saying that we want better things, I'm all for that.
Yeah, listen, real quick, Kurt, I know you want to get out of here, but now that we've kind of touched on it just a little bit, let me just put this out there. The concept of vaccinating, where I'm going to give you a little bit of this disease, you're just enough to where your body sees it and it builds antibodies, so that way the next time it comes around, you're able to fight it. Love the concept. Absolutely love it. It's like weight training. I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to create a stimulus for my body. It's going to respond, and the next time I'm in a situation where I need muscle, it's going to be there for me, right? Awesome concept. But I don't need to have these things in conjunction with mercury and other stuff. For how long did dentists say it was okay to have mercury fillings, and then, 50 years goes by, turns out that's fucking you up pretty bad. Turns out that might be leading to Alzheimer's. Turns out that might be leading to dementia. Turns out that mercury leaks into your brain through your mouth while you're sitting here.
Me lose brain? That's impossible.
Yeah. And let's not forget that cigarettes were once a highly touted and respected thing, and the science behind tobacco was there. So much to the point that doctors would light up in the doctor's office. This happened. The Earth was also flat. Science proved that. Science proved we were the center of the universe. So let's just keep things.
That was religion.
As we continue,
no science ever proved that. All right, you guys, thank you very much. Kyle, Nate, we'll be talking to you soon. Nate, any Twitter info that you want to put out there?
Nate Rock Quarry on Facebook. Nate Rock Quarry, you'll get on Twitter, you'll get my little 140 character sound bites, and on Facebook you'll get my real opinion. So if you want to follow me there, zombiecagefighter.com. If you want to go back to actually supporting fighters, zombiecagefighter.com is 100% my creation. If you go to the website, enter in your email address so I can keep you abreast with all the new outpourings of ZCF, you can get a free PDF of the comic book. Big things are happening. Go to zombiecagefighter.com.
And then make sure you follow us at Round by Round Pod on Twitter and Round by Round Podcast on Facebook. Thank you guys very much, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, gents. Have a